Yeah, I always say crisis is our biggest teacher. And it doesn't necessarily take a traumatic experience. And I know I had several of them. Sometimes life has to hit you over the head with a hammer. And then you realize, wow, there is a message here. And again, it goes back to that disconnect of who am I truly? And that's like a lifelong journey. And what I would just offer those that are listening in is to really start tuning into those soft whispers that you might feel in your body intuitively. Notice if your body's contracting at work. Notice if you're holding your breath. Notice if you're feeling exhausted at the end of the day. Notice if your joy is not there anymore. There could be these signs that are just bubbling to say, I'm traversing a road that's not truly aligned to who I am and my authentic expression in the world.
This is the Play Your Position podcast, where we huddle up, call the plays, and inspire you to run your ball into the end zone. Are you ready to score more game-winning touchdowns in your life, business, and career? Then listen up, because it's game time, baby. Now, here's your host, Mary Lou Kaiser.
Hello, Team PYP. Mary Lou Kaiser here. Welcome to another episode of the Play Your Position podcast. Today's game day, and you know what that means. I have a fantastic guest who is suited up and ready to take us into her world, where we are going to learn especially about how to end burnout and unlock our greatest potential. Her name is Mary Mosham. Mary, are you ready for kickoff?
I am so ready, Mary Lou.
I am too. So team, here's some things that I know about Mary. First of all, she is an award-winning leadership coach, mindfulness teacher, and author. She specializes in leadership, team, and personal development, yoga and meditation, and corporate mindfulness. With over 20 years experience in corporate change consulting and management at Cisco and Fortune 100 companies, she pioneered innovative people development solutions and led global change efforts that enhanced organization, leadership, and team performance. She is the newly published author of Mindful Career, 7 Keys to End Burnout and Unlock Your Greatest Potential. And away from work, she is passionate about traveling, hiking, healthy living, sponsoring the Tibetan Children Foundation, and creating a more sustainable world. Wow, Mary, you are an accomplished woman, and I'm so happy that you are here to share your story with us at PYP.
Oh, thank you for inviting me. I'm thrilled to be here.
Yeah. So right out of the gate, Mary, my first question every time is, you are today's starting quarterback. So you are down on life's great playing field, and we love to know, when did you get the call to leadership, and how does that call influence the position you're playing today as a leader in the world?
It's a great question. I got the call probably in my mid-20s. I realized that there was something bigger to do in this world. It was at the time I just left a family business. I didn't have any chance. I didn't have any idea what that trajectory was. But I really listened to a deeper intuition that I wanted to not only help leaders, but I also wanted to help employees really find their potential in their work. Because I found in my job and even in my journey that many of us go to work but forget about meaning and purpose. And there was a big opportunity to really basically inspire the hearts and minds of people and really help them uncover what they're uniquely here to do. And as I went into leadership, I started leading many global change initiatives, learning and development or development initiatives. And the more and more I talked to leaders around the world, I not only found that they were looking for, what am I here to do? How can I create a meaningful contribution in the world? What's my position to play? they were also suffering from stress and burnout. And that's what inspired me to go this next route of diving in. What is this whole cycle of stress and burnout?
Yeah. And so that led you ultimately to write your book, which I'm looking at right now. And if you could enlighten us about what is going on, what is going on out there? Why is there so much of this stress and burnout based on all the people you've worked with over the years, your observations and your intuition?
You know, it's interesting, Mary Lou. I was inspired to write this after, again, coaching leaders around the world and listening to how they were struggling with their well-being. Not only raising to the next level of their leadership ranks, but how do I maintain this pace? And when I looked globally, and then we got hit with the global pandemic, and my background's in org psychology and development, I realized what we're entering is what's called this VUCA world. It's more volatile, it's more uncertain and complex and ambiguous, and a lot of people don't have a playbook to navigate that world. We're used to more predictable ways of traversing our career, and it's different in 2020, and even it was different in 2010. And the whole growth of innovation around technology has been amazing in advancing us and connecting us around the world. However, it's also created a sense of always having to be on, feeling pressured, and a sense of stress and anxiety. And I talk about this whole concept of what's called attention deficit trait when we're being asked and so demanded of our energy to now be successful, that it takes a toll even deeper into our health and well-being. And so that became curious for me. And then the pandemic happened. And as I was coaching people, having them navigate now, not only the fast-paced life and the demands of having to be a leader and having to inspire teams and having to drive results from their business charter, they were now dealing with, well, how do I stay healthy in doing that? And so as I dug a little deeper into the research, Gallup showed that 66% of the time, people are experiencing stress and burnout. That's a lot. That's 2/3 working professionals. And that made me realize this is not just an everyday cycle. This is an epidemic that is sweeping, specifically in America. I couldn't speak so much around other countries, but definitely in America, we've been experiencing this burnout cycle. And if you would wonder, what is this burnout cycle? It really starts with some signs that are really important to recognize in yourself. And one of the signs is, am I feeling more irritable these days? Am I less patient with people? Do I feel like after a work day, I'm wanting to collapse, maybe mentally, emotionally, or physically? Am I feeling less proud of my accomplishments? Am I experiencing some health issues such as chronic headaches and other health issues that might arise as type 2 diabetes? So I was looking at the research, and it was just really compelling to see that there are some common signs that are showing their faces to us. However, we may not even notice them. We may not have that awareness to them. And some of the causes I also saw in the research is that when we feel like we have a loss of control, that we can't make the decisions to steer the business in a certain way, or we feel like there's so much focus on work, less focus on work-life balance. So some of these causes have really started to basically, what I share in the book is they lose their sense of personal identity. They lose their sense of meaningful contribution. And when you get to that place, it's like, here's a stop sign. You know, it's like, we need to look at this differently. And so I personally, as we talked before, I had a whole story of stress and burnout. And as I looked at my cycle, stress and burnout, and the cycle of many leaders that I coached around the world, I figured there's like 7 keys that can really help leaders play their best game. Mm-hmm. Not only at work, but in their life. And that's what the book outlines.
Yes, it does. Before we get into the 7 keys, because I do want you to touch on them, because they are so powerful, I'm curious, you you have worked with leaders from around the world and you notice something particularly different or maybe more amplified in American leaders. I have two questions here. One is there a difference in burnout between, do men experience burnout differently than women? That's my first question. And then why do you think America has such a high rate of this kind of burnout that you witnessed? Is there something about our culture that makes it so, or is it just perhaps more coincidental?
It's a great question. So I'll answer the first one around gender. There wasn't anything in the research that I read that men burn out more than women. I would say it was probably in my own direct experience, it's about 50-50. But knowing that, men, they tend to, what I have found, and also even women, they might even hide the fact that they're burned out. They might not even recognize that's where they're at until something does happen, what I call is a wake-up call. And even for women, they would have the same experience. And then there'd be some women and men that they say, I'm burned out. I am losing a sense of who I am, and I'm losing touch with my family. And some of them will recognize it right away. But I don't have specific statistics on either one. But I do know that people are more sensitive, even with the whole global pandemic. I think it just heightened people's awareness of what physical and mental well-being looks like.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Because you were, coaching and working with leaders in the C-suite, leaders who are higher in the ranks and have different kinds of pressures, different kinds of responsibilities than, say, again, in a hierarchical system. Those at the more entry-level positions might not experience, although perhaps it is widespread. It really doesn't matter what level you're working at, that Gallup poll that you cited may be more telling than we realized.
Yeah. So what the Gallup study was looking at and researching millennials, a lot of millennials, but also there was a spectrum of different generations. So a lot of millennials were experiencing stress and burnout, and it didn't really define specifically the rank of leadership roles. What I'm finding is that middle management has a lot of the stress and burnout because they're in a place where they have to contribute and they're just learning how to delegate and how to prioritize their work. So a lot of that director level, how do I elevate so that I can play at those higher levels? I'm feeling that they're experiencing a lot of stress and burnout and not knowing when to have healthy boundaries between work and life. There's a lot of tools that I'll go into. It's just setting, being able to just even say no to work capacity. And I feel like what trend I saw is that as much as companies were downsizing, the workload did not stop.
Yes, I have read that. And that is definitely a recipe for fast burnout. So what are the 7 keys? Would you mind listing those that you share in the book? And of course, we want readers, there'll be a link to Mary's book on our show notes page at pyppodcast.com. And I have read it and I highly recommend it for yourself if you feel like you are experiencing burnout, or maybe you know somebody who is exhibiting some of the signs Mary just shared with us. It's an excellent playbook on navigating out of this space of not feeling like a whole person. And that's really what it comes down to is, what price are you willing to pay for your well-being is an underlying question that you're asking people to consider. And so what are these amazing 7 keys that just list them and we can hear what they are?
Absolutely. So the first key, what I realize is important is what I call find your true north. Many of us will go into a job and it may not be the job that's aligned to our unique strengths or passion, but we'll just take the job. Maybe it's financially attractive or it's in a good industry. So finding your true north, finding what you are here uniquely to do, finding your life purpose, what's your strengths, what are your weaknesses, and also aligning your life not only around work, but having an orientation of how do I cultivate my well-being as well. So not putting that on the sidelines, but putting that central to bringing your full potential into work. So finding your true north is key. What I found in some of the research is that only 20% of the people are playing to their strengths.
Wow. That's 80% who are not.
Yeah. And maybe in that 80%, they may be some of the activities that they do really feeds them. They feel a sense of energy and passion, but most of it is like, I'll just suck it up. There's a lot of sense of, am I working for obligation, or am I working for a sense of inspiration? And that's a question I often ask people. And then when we get deeper into why am I here on this planet, and what is it, is my compass pointing to my true north, or is my compass pointing to something else? It's a real wake-up call for people, and we start there. And then once we go into the first key and really get that groundwork, we ask ourselves, and this is key, and of course it's often skipped, is your oxygen mask on?
I love that key.
Yeah. So as leaders, and one of the things I coach, as you know, is high performers.
Sure.
So high performing leaders is like they have no limit and they have tremendous capacity. They have tremendous heart. They want to do awesome things in the world. They want to create a legacy. However, what happens is they'll do it sometimes at the expense of their well-being and their health. And this whole thing about self-care, I kind of blow it out of the water saying self-care is a gift. It's your life rescue emergency kit. And the way I look at self-care is, are you setting boundaries? Are you saying no? Do you have this sense of FOMO, on fear of missing out? Many people do. And I could say I'm somebody that experienced that not only in my career, and I always experience it now as an entrepreneur, is that what is that next big opportunity? And I don't want to feel left out. So there's a number of these different perspectives and mindsets that we deal with. And then we go into this whole sense of how am I optimizing my productivity? We look at workload and how to prioritize that, how to, capitalize on when you have the most energy. The research, a lot of the work in my book is neuroscience, and it's rooted in how our brains think and metabolize information. And so we go into also other areas around letting go of stressors. It's kind of a game changer, I know, for myself. But what are those stressors that are operating in my life? And if I was to make a list of them, how many of those can I really resolve? And that in itself is an opportunity to reduce a lot of the burnout, is in that list of stressors. And then finally in that chapter, I talk about fill your joy cup. For some reason, joy gets squeezed out of life. And what if joy could be the center of life? And what if there could be one thing you do every day that fills you with joy?
I love joy.
Yeah, when you say it, we automatically just smile.
I know, I'm smiling right now. And then I'm looking at key number 3, and that's part of my joy is when I do that. So tell us what that one is.
Yeah. So now we get into the magic of the book. So as I read about how we bring our full potential into the workplace and to life, we need to expand our capacities of our body, our minds, and hearts. And so key number 3 is about what are we doing to recharge and nourish our body? And for some reason, sometimes we operate like we only have heads. We're measured by our intelligence. There's a whole work, and we get into that in the 5th key around emotional intelligence. But our bodies are these refined instruments of helping us understand, are we overdoing it? And I go deeply into the fight-flight stress response, how to navigate that response, what happens physiologically. So those that love the science and the body, there's a lot of that for you to really get your hands into. And then we look at some best practices to really recharge the body. One of them is sleep. Sleep is underrated. I've been working with some executives and they say, I want to get to like 6 hours of sleep. And I'm going, wow, you need to get at least 7 or more. Some people don't get that much sleep. But we realize if we don't get that deep sleep, our whole productivity and playing at our best diminishes. So there's a checklist. There's 10 things you can look at in the book of how to cultivate a good night's sleep. And then there's these mind-body practices. Mind-body practices, I'm a certified in yoga and therapeutics as well as flow-based yoga. So understanding how to open up the body, but aligning the mind and the body awareness together. So then you become more conscious and mindful. And when you're working, you're saying, oh, wow, my body's hungry. I should take a break. So you're having these like communication signs with your body as you do these mind-body practices. And then we move into, of course, exercise. Running is amazing for endorphins. Nature is our medicine. So vitamin D.
Amen to that.
Yeah, vitamin D really supports, especially during this pandemic. You can get like, I believe, 20,000 IUs of vitamin D, get in the sun between 10 and 2. But how do you spend time with nature? It's grounding. There's many different research studies I share about both exercise and nature. And then finally, I get into nutrition. And what I found with my leaders is that they skip meals, or they're on the go and they just grab something that probably is not very healthy. So I have a list, I think about 10 best practices, including foods to eat and foods to avoid. Also, we talk about intermittent fasting. It's a big trend, how intermittent fasting can play out to really help heighten your performance, as well as your ability to feel physically and mentally and emotionally grounded. So those are some of the hacks I have in key number 3.
It's halftime here at the Play Your Position podcast, and we've got ourselves a great game. While you're up grabbing another snack and topping off your favorite beverage, make sure to subscribe to the show so you never miss another play. PYP is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever great podcasts can be found. Now, let's get back to the game.
Again, great detailed information, team. When you read Mary's book, she gives you questions and things to think about, journal prompts, really, really incredible depth of research that she's done. And I personally appreciate as a reader that there is the neuroscience piece, that she's not just pulling things out of thin air, and she really has grounded everything that she shared. Now, I want to save some of the keys for the readers, but one of the keys you were talking about is key number 6, Mary. This is a big deal right now for people. Could you talk about key number 6 for a minute?
Absolutely. So key number 6 is what I call when you start cultivating more awareness about your body and also tackling the active mind and growing this, what I call resilient heart. You get to a place of looking at yourself and saying, am I truly playing to my authentic leadership style? Am I living other people's expectations? And this, what I found, when we have disconnected from our authentic self and our authentic knowing, I call this innate intelligence. We have basically created a tension point, and it becomes this strong emotional exhaustion. And when we can realize that, wow, I am living the expectations of my boss or my family, and they are not true to my core values. They're not aligned with my true north. We have this wake-up call and we decide, I need to make different choices. And we realize we take that social mask off and say, this is who I am authentically. We become more bold. We become more comfortable in our skin. We have those conversations with the unpopular viewpoints in the room. And yet we don't associate our self-worth to our work anymore, but we associate our self-worth to how am I bringing my best and most powerful self into the day every day. Where am I rejecting myself?
Yeah.
And these are questions I feel that leaders have, and they may not always communicate, but on the coaching call, they have a safe space to really dive into, how do I bring my authentic self? I don't want to play the political game. A lot of people, it's funny, I think about, where does politics come from if no one really wants to play that game?
Right. That is an interesting question.
So being your authentic self is the key. And I share a story of Augie from the drama of Wonder, and how he had all these deformities. I think he had, 16 surgeries, and he was ostracized from school, and everybody made fun of him. And he showed up every day at school saying, this is who I am. And there's a great line in the movie, and also it's a book, is that we're born to stand out and not be this homogeneous person in the world.
It's true. We're not. It's like, that reminds me of that Marianne Williamson poem that has become almost an internet cliche, but it's so powerful, is that, who are we not to shine our light, right? Why do we self-censor and keep ourselves small? And that's one of the themes of your book, is that you are here for a reason. You are here to be a light for others. And until you work through some of these, like you said, the monkey mind and finding your authentic self and knowing what your true north is, you can't do that. You aren't going to be showing up and shining the light the way you're designed to. And that's why the work you do, Mary, is so, so important, because there are millions of people running around out there who don't know who they are, or they do, but they're so layered under, as you said, expectations and other people's narratives and cultural forces, that sometimes in some cases, we're not even given a chance. Because, right out of the gate, it's like, oh, you're going to be this. And until somebody does have a wake-up call, which if you haven't figured out, I'm leading you towards your story, which is so compelling. You had a wake-up call. In fact, what you call it in the book, I love this, is the accident that saved my life. So could you tell us about that and what happened?
Yeah. At age 25, I thought I was living the American dream. And I was one of those people that felt, okay, this is what I'm supposed to do. And I was in a family business. And at the end of the day, in 4 years, I was realizing running this particular business was killing my soul. And I realized I was reaching financial success, but I wasn't reaching happiness. And I took a trip with a girlfriend of mine. We loved to ski. It was in Southern California. And on the way home, we decided to take the scenic route, and a boulder, rolled into the road. And I was driving, and there it was. I turned the corner, and there's a boulder there. And my first instinct was to swerve, but the swerving, and there was icy embankments, took a wrong turn, and I ended up finding myself driving off the embankment and rolling it off maybe twice into a tree. And talk about a wake-up call. I was in the midst of thinking, what's next for me? But I didn't expect to have it so dramatic that it might be life-threatening. And in that time, I was upside down. And the funny thing is, the song Goodbye Yellow Brick Road was playing, which is kind of analogous to what I was leaving behind. I ended up getting my girlfriend and I to the road and flagged somebody to help us. We didn't have a scratch on us, maybe just minor scratches just from the glass crumbling from the car. But the paramedic looked at both of us and said, do you know the next turn was a 1,500-foot drop? And I thought, well, thank God I swerved at the 30-foot drop and there was a tree there, because that would have been bad news for me. And at 25, I would have ended my life.
Yeah.
And so he said, you too have an important purpose to live. And I still today, as I share that with you, it was reverberating in my body. And I go, a purpose. That's what I need. I need a purpose to live. And it literally got me so motivated to lead the family business, go back to school, get a master's in org psychology development at Pepperdine. And it fundamentally changed my life. And I said, thank God for that accident, because who knows where I would be now.
Sure.
And then, of course, in the book, and I won't go into so much detail, I had a number of other wake-up calls, because I realized it wasn't just finding my true north. I also needed to align my head, heart, and body to my authentic self. And those other wake-up calls, they were health-oriented. And this is why I got so passionate around stress and burnout. Because although I changed the mindset, I didn't orient my life around a narrative that brought me deeper health, well-being, and meaning and purpose. And those narratives got me in trouble. And until I started learning that, I realized that this purpose is not just my own unique purpose in the world, but this is a bigger purpose that I believe all of us are being called to play, especially in this global pandemic. What is our part to play in this collective world? And that's what mindful career is about.
Mm-hmm.
We find our destiny. We find why we're here on this planet. And each key gives you a set of tools that I learned along the way. And for something about being in a global pandemic, I thought, if I ever get COVID and I didn't last, I would like to give this away.
Well, it truly is a gift to the world. Because as we were talking about in the pre-chat, you had in mind, and when you wrote this, for people who are just on the edge of realizing that things are not working for them. They're getting some of those early signs that don't go away, the irritability, the emotional collapse at the end of the day, the nagging feeling in the pit of their stomach that there's got to be more to this, all those things. And yes, you lay out so brilliantly a path that people can follow to begin that journey towards personal transformation. And I wanted to ask you, not everybody, thank goodness, but at the same time, you survived a very traumatic accident that played out in your favor. So there's a reason that you were spared, if you believe in that kind of thing. For people who haven't experienced something like that, do you think it's possible to reach that breaking point where you do have a conversation in your head like you did, like, yes, that's what's missing from my life is purpose, or yes, that's what's missing from my life, fill in the blank. I guess what I'm asking is, does it take trauma to facilitate, kick us in the butt, for lack of a better term, and say, figure this out now, because you may not get another chance?
Yeah, I always say crisis is our biggest teacher. And it doesn't necessarily take a traumatic experience. And I know I had several of them. Sometimes life has to hit you over the head.
Several times.
With a hammer. And then you realize, wow, there is a message here. And again, it goes back to that disconnect of who am I truly? And that's like a lifelong journey. And what I would just offer those that are listening in is to really start tuning into those soft whispers that you might feel in your body intuitively. Notice if your body's contracting at work. Notice if you're holding your breath. Notice if you're feeling exhausted at the end of the day. Notice if your joy is not there anymore. There could be these signs that are just bubbling to say, I'm I'm traversing a road that's not truly aligned to who I am and my authentic expression in the world. I lay out key like meditations and practices that you could start cultivating those capacities. For some reason, especially if we're raised in a family that doesn't engage in emotional dialogue or really speaking your voice, we numb ourselves from that. So look for ways where you can return back to yourself. And so the mind-body practices, meditations, and just looking at the signs of your whole, your well-being and your mental well-being right now and physically, because your body's always talking to us. Our bodies are always talking to us. There's a book I love. It's called Our Bodies Keep Score. And they do. It's almost like we have a database of experiences. And then sometimes we don't want to believe that these are our longings or yearnings in life, and we push them aside. But there are these memories and things, and I would just say, tune in. Give your time for reflection. The book intentionally has reflection questions. So some people will want to read through really fast, but I would go chapter by chapter with the keys and ask yourself the questions, because it is ideally leading you to your destined path.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what I would offer people, is to give yourself space to get to know yourself at a deep level.
Mm-hmm. Wow, it's beautiful. And yeah, the way the book is laid out, it's not a difficult read, and yet it's a deep read. So I would second that, is take it chapter by chapter. Don't just jump around or try to race through it, but, take some time to reflect. And at this point, Mary, we are at the part of the show I call touchdown. So work with me here. I'm putting you in the red zone, and there are less than 30 seconds left on the clock. You are down by 4 points. It's third down, and it's now or never. Tell us a story about a time when you metaphorically ran the ball into the end zone for that game-winning touchdown.
Yeah. I would say 4 years ago, I grabbed the ball, and it was the fourth inning. It was the highlight of my corporate career. I just co-founded a coaching practice that serves over 8,000 people around the world. I was top of my game, but something in me said, there's something else I want you to do in the world. And I took it. I took the ball and ran for that touchdown and created my own business in leadership coaching and mindfulness. And then, of course, wrote the book, Mindful Career. And I'm so glad I listened to that next intuition, which I call these nudges along the way, and that I allowed myself to take the leap of something that wasn't very clear, but definitely was a longing that I've had as a calling for a long time in my life. So that would be my touch on, if anybody on the call is feeling this call within themselves, see if you would have the courage and capacity to take the leap. And if it's too difficult, always reach out for help and get mentored by people that have. And that's what I would offer. And that, of course, you can always reach me at marymosham.com. I offer many different coaching as well as courses to help people bring their most powerful and authentic selves to the world. And that would be the touchdown.
I love it. That is a touchdown. That is definitely the game-winning touchdown. So team, you'll be able to connect with Mary through her show notes page, again, at pyppodcast.com. There'll be a link to her book. There'll be a link to her website. And I encourage you to get into her world. And if you are feeling even a sliver of stress and burnout, you definitely want to pick up this book, because, even if you just flipped it open to any random page, which sometimes as a reader I like to do, I guarantee you that what page it opens up to for you, there's going to be something on there that's going to speak to you. And it may be the point of entry. So again, the book is called Mindful Career, 7 Keys to End Burnout and Unlock Your Greatest Potential. And Mary, before we officially say goodbye, would you be willing to share with us a book that has made a difference to you either recently or an old favorite that you could also share with us here at Play Your Position?
I'm such a reader, and
I know. There's so many.
There's so many books that have really inspired me. And I guess the themes of a lot of the books that I read is really how do you bring the fullness of your potential to the world. And unfortunately, I can't think of a specific name at this point, but they're mostly, I guess a genre I love Jack Kornfield's work, The Path of Heart. Yeah. The Path of Heart was really something because he was really opening a doorway for me. Like, what does it mean to have a path of heart, follow a path with heart? And it was an eye-opening one for me. And now it's led me into deep study around personal transformation and leadership development and mindfulness.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, there's one we can add. So excellent. And team, again, check out Mary's book. It's available on Amazon. You can go to her website. You can learn more about her and her coaching and her story. And Mary, this has been an absolute delight. You took us to places that I think is on everybody's mind, and you gave it language and several ways to get started with finding our authentic path and hopefully leaving burnout and stress behind for good. So I want to thank you for being a fabulous guest today here at PYP.
Thank you so much, Mary Lou. This was so much fun. I appreciate you inviting me.
Hey team, Mary Lou here. Who's number one in football changes from year to year. Fashion trends come and go, same with musical tastes. But leadership skills, they never go out of style. In fact, these days, leadership is an essential survival skill for a world that demands more from us than ever before. To succeed these days, you need to know how to show up for yourself so that you can then do the work you love with people you like the way you want. The Play Your Position Leadership Playbook helps you do this, and it's free. Go to pyppodcast.com to download your copy today. If being more successful this year, next year, in the 21st century is on your to-do list, get your copy of the Play Your Position Leadership Playbook now. pyppodcast.com. It's at the top of the page. You can't miss it. That's pyppodcast.com, and start being more of the leader you are meant to be today. This podcast was produced by Daniel Romeros. Show notes for this episode can be found over at pyppodcast.com. I'm Mary Lou Kaiser. Thanks for listening.
Got a great key offensive strategy you like to share? Write to us at coach@pyppodcast.com or on Twitter, use #PYP and let us know how you're running your ball into the end zone for those game-winning touchdowns.